All right, we're going to learn about trim and isNaN and how they're useful for handling forms like this. So we have a form, we don't want any numbers or spaces. Okay, let's learn about trim first. What does trim do? So let's say I have const string is equal to space A, some space B, C, and a bunch of spaces, then D, then a bunch more spaces. Okay, and then I'm going to do console.log string.trim. Let's see what we get on the right. So on the right, we get A, B, C, D. So what's different from this and here? So what trim does is that it looks at your string. It does not care about whatever spaces there are in between your letters or characters. All it cares about is that the spaces at the end, which it will take away, and the spaces at the beginning, which it will also take away. So this is what it returns, right? That's what we see here. But why is this useful? Well, if it's inside of an if statement, right? So right here, let me delete this. I'll do const value is equal to document.query selector. I'm going to select the input, which is this. And then I'm going to select its value. Okay. And then now I'm going to do if value.trim. If value.trim is negative or is falsy with the logical not operator, I'm going to do an alert. No empty spaces. Okay. So if we don't put in anything and we click submit, we get the alert. If we put in a bunch of spaces, we still get the alert. So how does trim work right here inside of an if statement? Well, remember, everything inside of an if statement is converted to a Boolean. Now, when they trim the value, if you trim a bunch of empty spaces with no characters inside, it goes from truthy to falsy. Okay? So the if statement says, hey, if we trim this and it just becomes an empty string, the if will convert this empty string to a falsy value, right? If we trim it and we end up with, like, let's say a letter, that means they did enter in something, and the if will run that as truthy, right? So this will prevent empty spaces or them not entering anything at all. Okay, what about if I enter in 55? How do we prevent that? Well, we can prevent that with isNaN. So we can do logical not operator isNaN, passing in the value. Okay, so now if I do 55, I get no empty spaces. Let's do or numbers. But how does isNaN work? Well, let's go to the right. So when you call isNaN on something, what it's actually doing is it's calling the number constructor on that something. So let's say if you call isNaN on an empty string, it will return false. If you call isNaN on a string with all spaces, it still returns false. We can understand that by trying to do number, no spaces, we get a 0. More spaces, we still get a 0. Okay. So when you call isNaN, it tries to convert your argument into a number. Okay. And since empty spaces can be converted to a number, we have to check for the opposite. Okay. So now, if we check our app, spaces, nope. Number, nope. Number with no spaces, still nope. But let's look at this. What happens if I delete the trim here? Okay. If I do a bunch of spaces, we still get that. So isNaN is actually also handling all the empty spaces. And that is because when you try to convert empty spaces, again, to a number, you get a 0. So this check actually prevents both empty spaces and numbers. Okay. Now, if you want them to have numbers, but just no empty spaces, then once again, you can do value.trim. and with the logical not operator. Okay, so now you can enter in numbers, that's fine. But if you have spaces, you're going to get the error. Okay, all right, I hope that was useful.